Hey, what's up guys? Nate here from Protoculture. Welcome back to Sonic Academy. So most of the time, if you ask somebody what does a send effect do, they'll tell you that's where you put your reverb and delays. But it can be so much more than that. So what we're going to do today is look at 5 ways that you can creatively use send effects in quite different ways. And hopefully some of these examples will get your creative juices flowing in your productions. Let's check this out. Right, so I've got a few different sources that we're going to be looking at. Let's just take a look at our first one. We've got this sort of polypulse sound out of Anna. And what we'll do is we'll just disable the effects here as well, take off the delay. So the first thing we're going to do is we'll start off with just a reverb. We're going to add a track. We'll add a FX send to selected channels. We'll call this polypulse verb. And I've inserted an instance of realm on there already. So initially what we have, typical reverb effect send. But we can take this a little bit further. We're going to create sort of like an interesting sort of pattern delay kind of effect with this. So what we're going to do is realm is going to dial this right up. We turn the mix up 100 because we are dealing with a send effect here. And let's go ahead and we're going to add something like gatekeeper here to basically gate out the reverb send that we have. We've got this nice long lush tail, and we're going to use gatekeeper to actually create a pattern from that reverb, and it's going to create sort of like a delay effect for us. We'll just use one of the presets. And we can take that a step further as well. Let's maybe get some delay on top of our gated sounds as well. So what we'll do is bring in an instance of replica. Dial that mix up a little bit, not full, because we want to kind of just have some of the dry signal coming out of gatekeeper as well. And let's take a listen to what we have now. So then we just added an instance of God phase as well, just to kind of give it a little bit more movement as well. And what you end up is with this really interesting kind of pattern delay kind of effect from that reverb send that we have there, rather than just sticking to the plain old reverb that we had on that send before. So the benefit with a lot of this stuff is that you can kind of keep the original sound intact and then add in some of these interesting movements on top of that by using additional plugins on the send effects. So let's take a look at another delay example here. We're going to set up a delay send on this chord riff that we have. Once again, we're going to add in our effect send. This time around, we'll grab delay plugin. We'll go with, let's just grab repeater. I don't want too much of the feedback here. I just kind of want to delay the source signal back a little bit. We'll maybe set that to a dotted note, and we'll keep that on 1/4 like that. Also, make sure that you turn up the mix all the way, which it currently is. And then we're going to grab an effect which you normally would never see on a effect send at all. I'm going to grab an instance of Stutter Edit 2. Let's open that up. And what we're going to do is, rather than triggering this from MIDI like it usually is intended to be used, we're going to click on that MIDI section at the top here. We're going to grab Auto, so that the effect that we currently have selected is constantly playing all the time. We can head back and we'll grab a preset from here. We'll just kind of do some preset diving here. Let's play that back and take a listen. And then we also have the option to EQ some of this out as well if there's too much going on there. And you're getting some really interesting stuff already without actually interfering with that sound at all. We can even play around some more. I find just going through some of these presets, sometimes you'll hit on something which is really interesting. That's a little bit more subtle, but I really like that one actually. And you're getting those really cool little stutter effects happening in your actual delay line there. And that wouldn't sound the same as just sticking stutter edit on it. Firstly, I don't believe stutter edit actually has a master dry wet dial. And also on top of that, remember that we're delaying the signal first. So what we're feeding into stutter edit is actually a quarter dotted note later than what it would be if we stuck this directly onto the insert. So it's definitely kind of creating a totally different rhythm for you by doing it in this order. So you can see stuff that typically you wouldn't find on a send effect. You can get some really, really interesting little movements and things without doing too much work at all on the actual sound itself. The next two examples that I want to look at are very specifically reliant on the fact that you can EQ the signal independently from the main sound that you are using. So what we'll do here is we'll grab, say for instance, this arpeggio line that we have. We'll get rid of some of the effects on that just for this. And let's stick a bit crusher on this channel here. So we'll grab Decimode. So Decimode actually does have some additional controls that you can kind of fine tune how this works or how it affects the sound. Let's take a listen to the sound first. So Decimode does have a cutoff filter, so you can actually affect it, but you see it's actually affecting the entire signal. Now you can dial that back as well to get a similar effect, but you still are limited to that filter which they've given you. So one of the beauties of having that inside of a send effect, for example, is that we can get that same effect but have a lot more control over it. So let's add in our FX channel once again. We'll grab an instance of Decimode. In actual fact, what we're going to do is grab an instance of shade first. And this is where the real magic with this happens, is that we are EQing it prior to the distortion phase or the bit crushing phase. And you'll hear just how different the tones are that you get. So let's first, without dialing in shade at all, we'll just put in a little bit of this bit crushing effect on here. So you can see now we've got that bit crushing like we had essentially just using the dry wet if we had it as an insert. But take a listen to what happens to the sound as soon as we start filtering this before it hits that distortion stage. And specifically with distortion when you start using higher resonance in your filters. So we'll just play around with this. near almost this kind of vowel-esque type sound that you're getting now that you're pushing those two resonant peaks into the distortion. What works really well is if you have something like shade as well, is to start adding in a little bit of modulation. So we'll grab something like the figure modulator. We'll adjust the shape slightly, bring down the rate. Let's rotate that one, maybe put in 5 vertices. And we'll assign Y1 to one of the frequencies and X1 to one of the other ones. So we've got some movement happening there now. Let's see what happens to our distortion signal now that we have motion on those resonant filters. We can even take this further now and start adding other things like, let's say, for instance, add in a mixer delay. And we'll delay the one channel by 5 milliseconds, the other one by, let's say, 20 milliseconds. So we get sort of a stereo effect now happening, but just on the effect send. Super interesting effect there already, and it can be quite subtle. I find using a bit crush on a send effect sometimes can be a really great way to add in just a little bit of sparkle to a sound, just especially in those high frequencies, just to kind of crunch them down slightly. It adds in the sort of impression of having something slightly more crispy and slightly brighter as well. So nice little way to deal with that as well. And this will apply to any sort of distortion effect. You can essentially kind of create multi-band distortions with any distortion plugin you want, with a lot of control over how those distortions react to the sound that you're putting in due to the EQ boost that you're putting in there. So let's take a look at another one in a very similar fashion. This again is very much related to how you EQ it as well. So a lot of you will be familiar with the concept of parallel compression. So recently, a lot of the compressors that come out all kind of have these dry wet dials that you can adjust how much compression is being applied, or the mix of the compression, which is essentially how you achieve that parallel compression sound. But once again, the benefit of doing this inside of a send effect is that you have so much more control over it depending on which compressor that you're using. Some compressors don't have, they'll have like a bass roll-off filter or something, but not a comprehensive EQ to adjust how that sound reacts. So what we're going to do here is, once again, add in our effect send. We'll use shade once again to kind of adjust how that compressor is going to react. And we'll use the new Empirical Labs, it's the mic E-comp, not the distressor, but it has a really nice tone when you kind of drive the compressor really hard. You can also overdrive this quite nicely as well, which you'll see in a sec. So let's take a listen. So that's the original bass that we have. So let's just nuke this completely. We'll drive the compressor a little bit more. We'll go with a slower attack so we let through some of those initial peaks, and we'll have a fast release time. We're really sort of squashing the life out of this now. But you can see currently it's affecting the entire signal that we're pushing through this. So we're basically just getting a effect where we stick this compressor on to an insert effector. What we're going to do now is take a look at how the compressor reacts when we start filtering it. So there we're now pushing through only the top section here, and we can actually even accentuate this more. There's a really nice little thwack that we get there from using this resonant filter. And let's drive this even more. I'm going to stick a soft clipper on here as well, just to kind of catch those peaks, and that's going to result in even more distortion as well. And then we can even EQ it post effects as well if we want to shape it even further. And then it's just a case of dialing in how much of that effect you want. We'll drive this one even further as well. Kind of really max that out, get a lot of saturation going there. So there's our original bass. Let's dial in some of that punch that we have now. You get that really sort of nice mid-range thwack happening there. So a really, really cool way of kind of shaping sounds just by having that control of doing everything inside of the send as opposed to layering these up in an insert chain. You just won't get the same effect because of the fact that it's being passed through serially, whereas this we are now doing all our processing in a parallel sense. Right, let's look at the last example I'm going to give you guys. We're just going to grab a piano patch. I'm going to set up a reverb for this. So some of you may know a plugin called Shimmer from Valhalla. There's a number of other ones that do something similar. We're going to create a similar effect, but without having to use that plugin at all. And once again, we have a lot of control over how it works. So Shimmer essentially is a pitch stage, a pitch and delay line, which then runs into the diffusion algorithm, which creates the reverb. We're going to kind of create this ourselves. We'll select effects channel again. We can leave in a shade there as well just to EQ the reverb. This is another important thing when using send effects is that you can actually EQ your reverbs in the send, so you can make sure that they don't sort of muddy up your mix a lot of the time. Okay, so let's grab a VPS. This is a pitch shift that I often use. We'll grab this one to start, but you can kind of use all sorts of different things. We'll maybe take a look at a frequency shifter as well and see if we get any good results from that. What we're going to do is we have this mix set to max, and let's bump the pitch up to, we'll lock that to steps, to 12. And let's take a listen. Sounds pretty horrible for now, but let's play with the grain size. Okay. Now what should happen as soon as we run a reverb over this, we'll go with something like Comet. And let's maybe actually stick in a delay line on top of that as well. We'll go with just replica again, I think. And we're going to just adjust this down to quite a quick delay. We'll get some more stereo information out of that. And let's whack our reverb up to full wet. We'll bring that in, bump the size up quite substantially, and add a little bit of detuning or modulation to this as well. Let's see what we get now. Pretty cool. So we can play around with different pitch shifting algorithms. The one downside to using this VPS pitch shifter is that it has quite a high latency on your system. Let's play around with something like a frequency shifter, for example. And just to top it off, let's see what happens if we add in a little bit of modulation. So yeah, there's 5 different ways to use your send effects in really interesting ways. These are just examples. They're really just intended to kind of kickstart your creative juices and see what you can come up with. You really can do anything with it, and just remember that it's key to kind of play around with the order of the plugins. You get some amazing effects just by boosting certain frequencies into a specific plugin in those sends as well. As you saw with the distortion, you get wildly different tones from manipulating the sound before it goes into that distortion phase on the send effects. So cool, I hope you guys found that interesting. I will catch you guys soon right here at Sonic Academy. See you then.
Thanks everyone for watching. We really appreciate all the support from you guys. If you love this video, then smash a like, and if you want to be notified about new videos, hit the subscribe and notification buttons. Peace!